So the question we are looking at today is, should I forgive others? And this Colossians verse, specifically the part which I really wanted to emphasize, is the forgive others as God has forgiven you, which is something which I believe we have said a lot within, especially within Christian circles, as a way to kind of encourage people to forgive other individuals. And that does immediately lead us to the simple answer to this whole question, which is yes, of course you should forgive others. But there is another sort of complexity to it all. And that's specifically with the question of, well, what if somebody does something really bad to you? Like something, let's say, something abusive. It would be a very good example here. Should you necessarily forgive others in that situation? And this is a question which I do think is something that kind of gets at times dismissed or treated in a way where it's not taken as seriously as maybe it should. Because the reality is it's very difficult in those situations to forgive somebody. And sometimes, if it's too easy to forgive somebody, that makes things actually worse. So there's a few things which I think that we need to kind of consider when we're talking about this. Some things that are very important to kind of keep in mind and understand so that we aren't kind of running into that sort of mistake. The big thing which I would say that is important to understand is that forgiveness is a process. It is not as necessarily as simple and quick as saying, I forgive you in every single situation. It can take years for somebody to actually get to a point where they're at peace with what happened to themselves and with that individual. The second thing which I think is important to kind of emphasize here is that forgiveness doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're all of a sudden, back together or best friends or whatever. Now, let me be very clear about this, because I do think there's a tendency on the other side to not forgive people for trespasses that really aren't that big of a deal, just because, for whatever reason. But I do think in the cases of like trauma and, abuse, those kind of big sort of situations, it's probably wise to understand that if the relationship you had with that individual before was harming you or led to you being harmed, it's not safe to restore that relationship. And it's probably, you can definitely forgive somebody in that sort of way without, coming back into relationship with them. I think that's important to kind of remember, because it is one of those things when we're talking about that kind of side of these things where, if we just say, you should forgive them, it kind of misses that sometimes it's really just not safe to get back in that situation. And there should be some hesitancy to restore, talking to somebody who really really hurt you. I mean, that's the way we should kind of approach these things. And the final sort of thing which I would emphasize here, which I believe is very sort of relevant and important to this, is that, hold on, I need to look at my notes. Is that it's more about yourself. I believe that the reason why we should forgive others is not just because it can restore the relationship between us and another human being, and that's important. But from a psychological perspective, it is healthy. I mean, removing the religious side of this, which, there is that heavy, we have commands within Scripture that says, forgive others because, God forgave you. It's, for goodness sakes, it's within the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others. This is a theological idea that very much is ingrained in there, but I do think that we need to sometimes get a little bit past that and remember that outside of the obvious religious implications of it, there's a very real and psychological benefit to it. Within the Hebrew, the word for forgiveness can mean unwind, to unwind, or an unwinding, or an unbinding. So it's the idea that you're, letting yourself sort of get out of this whole sort of thing that's bringing tension within your life and moving to a state where you're more at peace and more, out in the open. And I think that's very important. Coming to terms with these tough things is psychologically healthy, and it is something that we need to do. And it's probably why it is commanded for us in Scripture. Actually, I'm sure it is. You can't go, the longer you bear a grudge against somebody, the more it's going to eventually, destroy you, regardless of what that was. Now, again, going back to my first point, this can be a process. This is not for me to say that if you are out there and somebody did something truly horrible to you, that you should just instantly forgive them right now. That's completely foolish. It can take time, but I do believe that you should work towards it, because you're going to be in a better spot if you do it and you go through that entire process. So that is all I have for this week, and I wish you all well and stay safe.